elements are the building blocks of a user interface. They are the visual and interactive components that users see and interact with on a screen. UI elements can include a wide variety of elements such as buttons, text fields, drop-down menus, sliders, checkboxes, radio buttons, and more. Each element has its own unique purpose and function in the interface, and together they form a cohesive and functional whole. As a UI/UX designer, it's important to know the anatomy of each UI element to be able to design and use them properly. In the upcoming videos, we'll discuss the most common UI elements, so see you in the next one. A text field is a user interface element that allows users to enter text or numerical data into a form or input field. It's one of the most common and essential UI elements found in websites, apps, and software, and the reason is obvious. Without text fields, it's impossible to collect data and information. The anatomy of a text field typically includes the following parts: label, the container, the placeholder, the input text, the cursor or caret, the leading icon, the trailing icon, the supporting text, and the prefix and suffix. The label is a short description or prompt that tells the user what type of information they should enter into the text field. The label can be positioned either inside or outside the field. The container or input area is where the user can enter text or numerical data. It's a rectangular box that can vary in size depending on the amount of text or data that needs to be entered. A placeholder is a hint text that is displayed inside the text field when it's empty. It provides users with an idea what type of information they should enter into the field. What about the input text? Once the user starts typing, the placeholder text will be replaced with the input text, which is the text the user has entered into a text field. The cursor, also known as caret, is a blinking vertical line that indicates the current position of the text entry. What about the icons? The leading icon is an icon that is positioned inside the text field on the left side of the input area before the user starts typing. The leading icon is usually used to provide additional visual information to the user, such as an icon that represents the type of information to be entered. For example, in a search bar text field, a magnifier icon can be used as a leading icon to indicate that the user should enter a search term. Similarly, in a username or email address text field, an icon of a person can be used as a leading icon to indicate the type of information that should be entered. Keep in mind that including a leading icon in the text field is optional. But what about the trailing icon? A trailing icon is an icon that is positioned inside the text field on the right side of the input area, after the user has entered text or numerical data. The trailing icon is usually used to provide additional functionality to the user. For example, in a password field, a trailing icon can be used to show or hide the entered password. Or in a phone number field, a trailing icon can be used to initiate a call. And in a search bar, a trailing icon can be used to clear the search field or to submit the search query. Just like the leading icon, having a trailing icon is also optional. The next element is the supporting text. Supporting text in a text field is additional text or a hint that's displayed below the container of the text field. The purpose of supporting text is to provide users with more information about what's expected to be entered in the text field or to provide feedback on the entered data. For example, supporting text can be used to provide guidelines on the expected input format or to inform users of any restrictions or limitations on the entered data. In a password field, supporting text can be used to provide tips on how to create a strong password. In a phone number field, supporting text can be used to provide the required country code or to indicate the expected format. Supporting text can also be used to provide feedback on the entered data. For example, if the entered data is invalid or incomplete, supporting text can be used to display an error message or a suggestion to correct the data. What about the prefix and suffix? Prefix and suffix input labels are text labels that are positioned before or after the input field in a form, respectively. A prefix label is typically used to provide additional context or information about the type of data that should be entered in the input field. For example, a prefix label might be used in a form that requires a user to enter their phone number with the label +1 as the code of the country positioned before the input field. A suffix label, on the other hand, is typically used to indicate the unit of measurement or currency for the input field. For example, a suffix label might be used in a form that requires the user to enter their weight, with the label lbs positioned after the input field. Including prefix and suffix is also optional, so keep that in mind. Now that you know the anatomy of a text field, let's talk about its types. Generally, there are three types of text fields: contained, outlined, and underlined. Depending on the style you prefer, you can choose from them. Now let's talk about the different states of a text field. A text field has different states: inactive, active, focused, hover, error, and disabled. Number 1. Inactive or default state. This is the default state of a text field when it's not in use. In this state, the text field is visible but not interactive, and appears grayed out or dull in color. Number 2. Active state. The active state is when the text field is being used but is not yet focused. For example, when the user is in the middle of typing into the field but has not yet clicked on it or tapped into it. Number 3. Focused. When the user clicks on or tabs into the text field, it enters the focused state, indicating that it's ready to accept input. In this state, the text field is highlighted and any text entered will appear in the field. Number 4. Hover state. When the user hovers over the text field with his or her mouse, it enters the hover state, indicating that it is interactive. In this state, the text field may appear slightly different, such as with a lighter background color or underline. Number 5. Error state. If there is an error in the input entered by the user, such as incorrect format or invalid characters, the text field may enter an error state. In this state, an error message or icon may appear next to the field, and the field may be highlighted in red to draw the user's attention to the error. Number 6. Disabled state. A text field can be disabled to prevent user input. In this state, the text field appears grayed out, indicating that it is not available for input. Buttons are one of the most important UI elements because they let users take action or trigger an event. Let's talk about the anatomy of a button. Here are different parts of a button: label, container, and icon. The label is the text displayed on the face of the button. It's the main visual element of the button and communicates its purpose to the user. The container is the area around the label that shape a button. And an icon can be used in combination with text or on its own to convey a message or call to action to the user. It's often placed alongside text to enhance the visual design and provide an additional means of communicating the purpose of the button. For example, a shopping cart icon can be used on an Add to Cart button to visually convey the action that the button will perform. In general, we have 5 types of common buttons: field or contained, tonal, outlined or ghost, text, and icon. Let's start with field or contained. A field or contained button is a button that has a solid background color and a contrasting text color. A tonal button is a button that has a label color that's similar to the background color, but with a slight variation in shade or saturation. An outlined or ghost button is a button that has a border but no background color. A text button is a button that only has text and no background or border. And finally, an icon button is a button that only has an icon. We have other less common types of buttons like toggle, floating action buttons, and segmented buttons, but in most cases, we use the 5 common types I just mentioned. You may ask how we should know when to use each button type. Let me explain that. Buttons have 3 internal hierarchies: low emphasis, medium emphasis, and high emphasis. The field button is a high emphasis button, which means we should use it for the most important or the most common action on the page. The tonal and outline buttons are medium emphasis buttons. Therefore, we use them for actions that are less important than primary actions, but more important than low emphasis or tertiary actions. They are often used for actions that are secondary or supplementary to the primary action of the page, and can be used to provide additional options or actions that are relevant to the user. The text and icon buttons are low emphasis and should be used for less important actions like links. Just like text fields, buttons also have different states: enabled, disabled, hovered, focused, and pressed. An enabled button is a button that can be interacted with and clicked. This is the default state for most buttons. A disabled button is a button that cannot be interacted with and clicked. This state is often used when an action is not currently available or allowed, such as when a required field is not filled out yet. A hovered button is a button that the user is currently hovering over with their mouse or pointer. This state is often used to provide visual feedback to the user and can be used to highlight the button or change its appearance in some way. This state doesn't exist on touchscreen devices like tablets and mobile. A focus button is a button that has been selected or focused on by the user, often through keyboard navigation. This state is often used to provide accessibility to users who are navigating through the interface without a mouse, and can be used to highlight the button or change its appearance in some way. And finally, pressed. A press button is a button that's currently being clicked or touched by the user. This state is often used to provide visual feedback to the user and can be used to change the appearance of the button, such as by changing its color or size, to indicate that the button is being pressed. When it comes to designing and using buttons, there are many things to keep in mind, and we will discuss these points later in the course. A slider is a UI element that allows the user to select a value or a range of values by moving a slider along a horizontal or vertical track. Sliders are commonly used in interfaces where the user needs to input a value within a certain range, such as adjusting the volume on a media player or selecting a value for a parameter in a form. The basic structure of a slider consists of an inactive track, an active track, a thumb or handle, and optional minimum and maximum value icons. The track is the horizontal or vertical line that represents the range of values available to the user. The thumb or handle is a small circle that the user can click and drag along the inactive track to select a value or range of values. The active track is an element that visually indicates the selected range of values. Generally, we have two types of sliders: continuous and discrete. A continuous slider allows the user to select a value anywhere along the track, and the selected value can be any number within the specified range. The thumb of the slider can be dragged along the track to select the desired value, and the selected value is updated in real time as the thumb is moved. Continuous sliders are commonly used for settings or values that require a high degree of precision, such as selecting a specific time or temperature. A discrete slider, on the other hand, restricts the user to selecting only specific values along the track, which are usually predefined or evenly spaced intervals. The thumb of the slider can only snap to these specific values, and the user cannot select any value in between. Discrete sliders are commonly used for settings or values that do not require a high degree of precision, such as selecting a font size or volume level. The choice between continuous and discrete sliders ultimately depends on the specific needs of the interface and the user experience. Continuous sliders offer more precision and flexibility, but can be more difficult to use for users who are less familiar with the specific value range. Discrete sliders, on the other hand, are easier to use but offer less precision and flexibility. Just like other UI elements, a slider has different states as well: enabled, disabled, hovered, focused, and pressed. Tooltips are a common UI element that provides users with additional information about UI elements such as buttons, icons, or other interactive elements. A tooltip typically appears when a user hovers over or taps on an element, and disappears when the user moves their cursor away or taps outside the element. Tooltips usually consist of a short text description that clarifies the purpose or function of the UI element. Tooltips can be used for providing contextual information, explaining unfamiliar concepts or terminology, or clarifying the expected outcome of a user action. When designing tooltips, it's important to keep them concise and clear. The text should be easy to read and understand, and the tooltip should appear quickly after the user hovers over the element. The design and placement of the tooltip should also be considered, as it should not obstruct the user's view or interfere with their ability to interact with the element. Selection controls are UI elements that allow users to select options or make choices from a list or set of options. There are several types of selection controls, including checkboxes, radio buttons, switches, and chips. Checkboxes are small boxes that users can click to select or deselect a single option or multiple options. Radio buttons, on the other hand, are circular buttons that allow users to select a single option from a list of mutually exclusive options. When the user selects one radio button, any other radio buttons in the same group are automatically deselected. This makes radio buttons ideal for situations where the user needs to select one option from a small set of options, such as selecting a gender or language preference in a user profile or selecting a payment method on a checkout page. The term radio button originated in the early days of radio technology, when radio sets had buttons that could be pressed to select a specific station. Once a button is pressed, all the other buttons should pop out. Switches are on and off toggles that allow users to switch a setting or option on or off, just like the light switch you see on your home's wall. But what about chips? Chips are small interactive components that allow users to select or filter options from a list or display a piece of information in a compact and visually appealing way. Chips can be used for a variety of purposes, such as displaying tags, categories, or filters in a search interface, showing selected items in a shopping cart or order summary, or displaying user information or avatars in a messaging app. It's worth mentioning that some people think that chips are a type of button, as they are quite similar in terms of appearance, but they have some key differences. Buttons are typically used to trigger an action or navigate to a new page or view, such as submitting a form, adding an item to a cart, or closing a dialog box. They are usually larger and more prominent than chips, and often have a distinctive shape or color to make them stand out. Chips, on the other hand, are used to display information or selections in a compact and visually appealing way. They are smaller than buttons and typically have a simple rectangular shape with an icon or label representing the selected item. When designing selection controls, it's important to consider the context in which they will be used and to ensure that they are easy to understand and use. Cards are designed to present information and actions related to a particular subject or topic. They contain concise and structured content, making it easy for users to quickly understand the information presented within them. UI cards are commonly used in web and mobile applications as a way to present information to users. They can include various types of content such as images, text, buttons, and interactive elements. Cards can also be used to display data such as statistics or lists. The main purpose of a UI card is to help users quickly scan and understand the information presented within it. Cards are designed to be visually appealing with a clear hierarchy of information and a consistent layout. This allows users to easily find the information they need and complete tasks more efficiently. UI cards are often used in a grid layout, where multiple cards are displayed side by side in rows, columns, or both. This layout helps to maintain a consistent and organized design while also allowing for flexibility in the arrangement of content. They can also be stacked on top of each other. Generally, we have three types of cards: elevated, outlined, and filled or contained. The elevated cards have a shadow that gives them a sense of depth and prominence. They are commonly used to highlight important content or actions. Elevated cards can help to draw the user's attention to specific elements on the screen. The outline cards have a border that separates them from the rest of the content on the screen. Outline cards help to create a clear visual separation between different types of content and make it easier for users to scan the page. The filled or contained cards have a solid background color that fills the entire card. They are commonly used for displaying content that requires a larger amount of space, such as articles or product cards. The content of the card can be grouped into blocks. Generally, a UI card contains a rich media section, a mandatory information section, an optional supporting information section, and an action section. Let me break it down for you. In the rich media section, we obviously need to have a large and attention-grabbing image. Right underneath, we have to have the mandatory information section, which usually includes the title and description. Next, we can include the optional information section, which usually gives the user more information to decide whether he or she wants to take action or not. It's optional because if you remove this section, the card still has all the necessary elements. And finally, the action section, which includes one or more call to action buttons. In UI design, a dialog refers to a modal window that appears in the foreground of the application's content, providing essential information or prompting the user for a decision. Once opened, dialogs disable all application functionality and remain on the screen until the user takes action, confirms, or dismisses the dialog. As dialogs are intended to be disruptive, they should be used carefully to avoid overwhelming the user. Generally, there are two types of dialogues: a basic dialogue and a full screen dialogue. A basic dialogue is a modal window dialogue that requires the user to interact with it before they can return to the main interface. These dialogues typically prevent the user from interacting with other parts of the application until they have completed the interaction with the dialogue. A full screen dialog is a type of dialog in UI design that takes up the entire screen, rather than appearing as a smaller modal window. Full screen dialogs are typically used when the user needs to complete a complex task or provide a significant amount of input or information. Unlike other types of dialogs, full screen dialogs are intended to be immersive and may replace the entire application interface temporarily. They often include a clear and prominent call to action that guides the user through the task at hand. Full screen dialogues may also feature visual cues such as animations or graphics to help the user understand the context and purpose of the dialogue. Since they take up the entire screen, full screen dialogues provide enough space for detailed instructions, input fields, and other elements that may be necessary for the user to complete the task. A simple dialog in UI design typically consists of several key elements: title, content, buttons, and icons. The title of the dialog is usually displayed at the top of the dialog window and provides a brief description of the dialog's purpose or topic. The main content of the dialog is where the primary message or information is displayed. This can include text, images, or other media. Dialogs often include buttons that allow the user to take action. For example, a submit or confirm button might be used to confirm an action, while a cancel button would allow the user to dismiss the dialog without taking any action. Icons can be used to enhance the user's understanding of the dialog. For example, an exclamation mark icon might be used to indicate an error or warning message. In addition to these elements, a dialog can include selection controls, text fields, date pickers, etc. When using basic dialogs, make sure to add a dark overlay to the background to let users focus on the dialog's content. A list is a group of related items that are displayed vertically. Lists are a common UI element used to display information in a structured and organized way. They can be used to present a variety of content, including text, images, and other media. Lists can be designed in many ways, depending on the context and purpose of the UI. The anatomy of a list in UI design typically includes several key elements: the list container, the list item, the item content, the dividers, and the interactive elements. Let's start with the list container. This is the outermost element that contains the entire list. It can be designed to have a border, background color, or another visual styling to differentiate it from the rest of the UI. The list item is the individual unit of content within the list, and the item content is the main content of the list item, such as text or an image. Dividers are used to visually separate list items from each other. They can be simple horizontal lines. Lists may include interactive elements as well, such as checkboxes or buttons to allow the user to take action on the items in the list. A list item has 6 different states: enabled, disabled, hover, focused, pressed, and dragged. In UI design, a table is a visual representation of data in a structured format that organizes information in rows and columns. Tables are commonly used in UI design to present data in a clear and organized way, making it easy for users to find and compare the information. Here are some key aspects of tables in UI design. Columns and rows. Tables consist of columns and rows that intersect to form cells. Each column represents a specific data category, while each row represents a record or instance of data. Headers. Table headers provide the labels for each column, helping users understand the data that's being presented. Headers can be static or sticky, meaning they remain visible as the user scrolls through the table. It's recommended to use sticky headers if the table is so long, because they allow users to easily navigate through a table of data without losing context or reference to what the columns represent. As users scroll through the table, the header remains visible and provides a clear indication of what data is displayed in each column. Sorting. Tables often include sorting functionality that allows users to sort the data in ascending or descending order based on a specific column. Filtering. Tables may also include filtering functionality that allows users to narrow down the data based on a specific criteria. And pagination. Tables that contain a large amount of data may be split into multiple pages to improve performance and make the data easier to digest. The alignment of elements in a table is important to create a clear and organized layout. Here are some best practices for element alignment in a table. Number 1. Table headers should be aligned to the left of the column to make it easy for users to scan and understand the information in the table. Headers aligned to the right can be confusing as they may appear to be the content of the column. Number 2. The text in the columns should be left aligned for easy reading and scanning. Left alignment creates a clear visual structure and improves readability. Number 3. Numbers and values should be right aligned to create a visual pattern that makes it easy for users to compare data. This is especially useful when working with large amounts of data, as it allows users to quickly identify trends and patterns. Number 4. Action buttons should be aligned consistently. If your table includes action buttons such as edit or delete, they should be aligned consistently to the right or left of the cell to create a visual pattern that users can quickly recognize and interact with. Number 5. Use consistent spacing. Consistent spacing between columns, rows, and cells helps create a clear visual hierarchy and makes it easier for users to understand the layout of the table. Navigation UI elements are components that allow users to move around within an application or website. These elements provide users with a clear and easy-to-use interface that helps them quickly find the content they are looking for. Some common navigation UI elements include menu bars, navigation drawers, tabs, tab bar, breadcrumbs, and search bars. Menu bars are horizontal or vertical bars that contain links to various sections of an application or website. Menu bars can be fixed or collapsible and can be located at the top, bottom, or side of the screen. Navigation drawers, also known as slide menus, are panels that slide out from the edge of the screen to reveal links to other sections of an application or website. Tabs are buttons or links that allow users to switch between different views or sections within an application or website. Tabs are commonly used to display content such as articles, product categories, or account settings. A tab bar is a horizontal bar located at the bottom of the screen that contains a series of tabs, each representing a different view or section of the application. Each tab typically has a label or icon that represents the content of the view or section it navigates to. Users can switch between tabs by tapping on the desired tab, which will take them to the corresponding view or section. In general, it's recommended to use 3 to 5 tabs in a tab bar. Breadcrumbs are a navigational aid that shows users the path they have taken to arrive at their current location within an application or website. Breadcrumbs are typically displayed horizontally at the top of the content area. Search bars allow users to search for specific content within an application or website. Search bars are commonly located at the top of the screen and may also include advanced search options. Chart UI elements are graphical representations of data that are used to help users understand and compare complex information at a glance. There are several types of chart UI elements, including bar chart, line chart, pie chart, and area chart. A bar chart is a chart that represents data using rectangular bars. The length of each bar represents the value of the data it represents, making it easy to compare values between different categories. A line chart is a chart that represents data using a series of points connected by lines. It's commonly used to show trends and patterns over time. A pie chart is a chart that represents data as a circle divided into segments, with each segment representing a category of data. The size of each segment represents the proportion of the data it represents. An area chart is a chart that represents data using a series of points connected by lines, just like the line chart, with the area between the lines filled in. It's commonly used to show trends over time. There are other types of charts that were not mentioned as they are less common in UI/UX design. When designing chart UI elements, it's important to consider the context and purpose of the data being presented, as well as the needs and preferences of the target audience. Charts should be designed to be visually appealing, easy to understand, and accessible to all users, including those with visual impairments or disabilities. Labeling, color, and typography should be used to help users understand the data being presented and to guide their attention to the most important information. A snack bar is a UI element that displays a brief message or notification to the user. It's typically a small rectangular box that appears at the bottom of the screen and disappears automatically after a few seconds. The purpose of a snack bar is to provide users with important information or feedback about their actions within the application, such as confirming that an action was successful, alerting them to an error or warning, or providing tips or suggestions for using the app. Now let's talk about the anatomy of a snack bar. Like cards and buttons, a snack bar has a container that holds the content inside. It has a supporting text and an optional action button and an icon. When designing a snack bar, keep in mind that you should not include more than one button in it. Because as I mentioned before, a snack bar should disappear quickly, so the user doesn't have much time to process more than one button. It's also important to keep the message brief and clear, using simple and easy to understand language. The message should also be easily noticeable and distinguishable from other UI elements on the screen, using contrasting colors or animations to draw the user's attention. Finally, it's important to choose an appropriate duration for the snack bar to be displayed, balancing the need to provide users with important information without interrupting or distracting them unnecessarily.